The massive Boeing 787 trembled softly as its engines came to life, the warm amber lights reflecting off weary faces in the business cabin. But no one on board knew that within just a few hours, this flight would become the epicenter of a storm, where one man, dismissed and underestimated, would make an entire system bow its head. Dominic Reed adjusted his tie, the reflection of the runway lights glinting in the window beside seat 12A, the seat he had chosen with precision. Outside, the left wing gleamed under the floodlights. Inside, the business cabin felt like a world apart. Seats reclined to a full 180 degrees, champagne fizzed in crystal glasses, and quiet conversations drifted through the air, as if every sound had been carefully programmed to maintain order. Dominic scanned the cabin. No one paid him any attention. A black man in his 40s, tall and lean, dressed in a sharp grey suit with calm, observant eyes. He looked like any other passenger. No one knew that he was the man who had just won a $3 billion arbitration case for a global tech conglomerate, or that a single phone call from him could freeze international banking transactions for hours. He preferred it that way, to stay hidden, to let people judge first and regret later. As the aircraft settled, Dominic opened his leather briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. His fingers turned each page with deliberate rhythm, like a conductor guiding the symphony of power. It was the contract for a major corporate arbitration in London, one that could alter the fate of thousands with a few signatures. Dominic wasn't just a lawyer. He was the man who ended wars with logic and silence. "Excuse me, sir." The voice cut cleanly through the still air. Paige Whitmore, the lead flight attendant, stood beside his seat. Her makeup was immaculate, her smile perfectly measured, the kind that often hid superiority behind politeness. Dominic looked up. "Yes?" Paige leaned slightly closer, her tone light but loud enough for half the cabin to hear. "I'm going to have to ask you to move seats. We have a VIP passenger who needs this spot." The words dropped like a pin into still water. No one reacted, but everyone heard. Dominic set down his pen and raised an eyebrow. "I'm afraid you must be mistaken. This is my seat." Paige kept smiling, though her eyes cooled. "We've arranged another seat for you further back." "Further back," he repeated, his voice still calm. "I purchased a business class ticket. I chose this seat specifically." Her smile tightened. "Mr. Vale requires a special seat. He's a global tier passenger." Dominic glanced briefly at the man in question, a sleek figure in a navy suit, wireless earbuds in place, speaking loudly on the phone. Trent Vale. The name sounded familiar. A CEO known for his ruthless investment firm, Vale Capital. Trent glanced at Dominic for only a second, but in that second, his look carried an order, the kind of gaze belonging to someone accustomed to others stepping aside. The cabin tensed. A few passengers glanced up, then quickly looked away. Paige repeated, this time with less patience. "Sir, this is company policy. I'm asking for your cooperation." Dominic smiled faintly, a gesture so composed it made Paige instinctively step back half an inch. It wasn't a large movement, but it carried weight. "Could you please show me the specific policy that allows you to remove a paying passenger from a confirmed seat because of another person's status?" Paige froze. Silence filled the air. Her face flushed slightly, and her voice faltered. I'll need to check with my supervisor." Dominic nodded once. Please do. He lifted his glass and took a sip of water, utterly calm. Trent Vale shrugged and looked away, his expression dripping with smug indifference. To him, this was a minor inconvenience, a delay caused by someone who didn't matter. But to Dominic, it was the first signal of a larger battle. A collision between false privilege and real power. As boarding continued, Dominic turned back toward the window. Beneath the yellow glow of the floodlights, something caught his eye. A faint shimmer along the left wing, like a sliver of metal glinting unnaturally. He frowned, tilting his head. 2 maintenance workers had been there moments ago, wiping something down, but they moved too quickly. A flicker of unease passed through his mind, subtle as wind. He didn't know it yet, but that single glint, that almost invisible trace of light, would decide the fate of everyone on this flight. While Trent Vale laughed loudly into his phone, boasting about a $1 billion merger, Dominic Reed sat quietly in seat 12A, a glass of water in his hand, his gaze fixed on the window. A man underestimated, a seat that seemed ordinary, and a moment that would redefine the meaning of power. Because sometimes, the one who looks like just another passenger is the one who writes the laws of the sky. The atmosphere in the business cabin had begun to shift. Passengers were still trickling in, but those seated near 12A had stopped talking. Everyone could feel it, a stillness before the storm. Paige Whitmore returned, this time with a younger attendant beside her. The smile on her face was rigid, like a mask. Dominic Reed remained seated, his eyes calm and unreadable. "Sir," Paige began, her tone colder and sharper than before, "I need you to move immediately so we can ensure an on-time departure." Dominic set down his pen and looked directly at her. "Are we really having this conversation again?" Her lips twitched. "You can either cooperate or cause a disturbance. I think you understand what that means." Her voice was loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Several passengers turned to look, some curious, others annoyed, and a few waiting to see how it would end. Dominic tilted his head slightly, not angry, merely as though he were studying a chess move. "I paid for this seat," he said quietly, "and I haven't broken any rules. So if you intend to threaten me, I suggest you pick a regulation that actually exists." Paige froze. That tone, it wasn't the voice of someone afraid. It was the voice of someone who had silenced arbitration panels with a single sentence. Behind her, Trent Vale's patience ran out. He closed his phone and said in his usual commanding tone, "Leora, sorry, Paige. Get me that seat now. I don't have time for nonsense." "Yes, Mr. Vale." The title Mr. Vale rang out loud and clear, intentionally for all to hear. Dominic looked at him, his expression not angry but analytical. Trent stepped forward, stopping in the aisle, towering over Dominic as if addressing an employee who had forgotten to stand when the boss entered the room. "You're sitting in my seat," he said dryly, with practiced authority. Dominic raised an eyebrow. "Really? What seat number does your ticket say?" Trent gave a short, smug laugh. "You don't get it, do you? I don't have to argue over numbers. They know who I am." The cabin held its breath. A man in the next row shook his head slightly, as if warning Dominic not to push further, but Dominic only smiled. "Interesting. I've always believed the rules apply to everyone." Paige interjected, her voice stretched tight as a wire. "Sir, Mr. Vale is a global tier member, a major contributor to the airline. Our policy prioritizes discrimination, Dominic interrupted, his tone still soft but his gaze sharper now. You know, I've read your airline's regulations. There's nothing in them that allows staff to remove a paying passenger just to please someone else. Paige was truly rattled now. She had never encountered a passenger so calm it was unnerving. Trent Vale gave a low, derisive laugh, crossing his arms. You really don't know how to pick your battles, my friend. I can make sure you never fly this airline again. Dominic turned his head slightly, his eyes like glass. You're welcome to try. But you should know, I'm not the kind of man who stays seated when disrespected. Silence fell. Their eyes locked, one belonging to a man used to giving orders, the other to a man who understood the law behind them. Paige bit her lip, then suddenly snapped. If you continue to refuse, I'll have to call the cabin manager, and if necessary, we can remove you from this flight. A small gasp escaped from someone in the back row. It was a serious threat, especially when directed at a black man in a business cabin full of cold, watchful eyes. Dominic nodded slowly. Very well, he said, his voice low and steady. But before you do, remember this. Any directive from the crew must be lawful and related to flight safety. Reassigning my seat for someone's status. He paused, his tone sharpening. Doesn't qualify. Paige opened her mouth, but couldn't form words. From across the aisle, a middle-aged man, likely a business executive, let out a weary sigh and muttered, "He's right. Rules are rules." Trent rolled his eyes, grabbed his phone, and turned away, muttering something like ridiculous and waste of time. Dominic simply watched him go, saying nothing. Then he returned to his files, slipping on his reading glasses, as if the confrontation had been nothing more than the prelude to a courtroom hearing. But deep inside, something simmered, not anger, but vigilance, a feeling that this was far from over. He exhaled slowly and looked out the window. The airport lights shimmered across the wing like a ribbon of steel. And in that moment, Dominic murmured quietly, his voice low and icy, "We'll see who really gets removed from their seat." His words sank into the hum of the engines beneath the floor, the sound of a battle about to begin. The business cabin of Global Air Flight 110 now felt like a silent courtroom suspended in the sky, every gaze fixed on seat 12A. No one spoke. No one moved. The air itself was stretched thin, like a violin string waiting to snap at the slightest sound. Paige Whitmore had disappeared behind the curtain, clearly to summon her superior. But Dominic Reed knew one simple truth. When people lose an argument, they reach for authority. He took a quiet sip of water, calm as ever. Around him, murmurs began to rise among the passengers, mingled with uneasy sighs. "Who is that guy?" a woman whispered. "Probably just a regular passenger," the man beside her replied. "Picking a fight with a VIP like that, he's done for." Dominic heard it all, but didn't react. He was used to this kind of judgment, the unspoken hierarchies of status and color, the assumption that the world's order was fixed. He picked up his pen and drew a small line across the margin of his document, a gesture of quiet focus. Every move he made had purpose, not to rebel, but to remain in control. 2 minutes later, the curtain snapped open. Page returned, accompanied by a tall, broad man in a dark grey suit, his face carved with authority. Gavin Holt, the purser of the flight. He didn't walk toward Dominic. He advanced, like an officer arriving to enforce compliance. "Sir," Gavin began, his voice firm but clipped, "I've been informed of the situation. To ensure an on-time departure, I'm instructing you to move to seat 18E. This is a directive from the cabin crew." Dominic looked up and smiled faintly. Seat 18E. If I recall correctly, that's the last row in business, right next to premium economy. Gavin hesitated briefly. "That's correct, but that's irrelevant. We're providing you with a reasonable solution." "A reasonable solution," Dominic repeated, as if testing the phrase like a legal clause. He set his pen down, interlaced his fingers, and leaned slightly forward. "Tell me, Mr. Holt, what happens if I refuse?" Gavin tilted his head, his tone frosty. "Then we'll consider it non-compliance with a crew directive, and we may have you removed from the aircraft." It was the voice of someone accustomed to giving orders, not receiving questions. But Dominic didn't look at Gavin. His eyes shifted past him, locking on Trent Vale, who sat smugly in seat 12B, arms folded, wearing the satisfied expression of a man who thought victory was inevitable. "You know," Dominic said softly, "the funny thing about people who think they're in control is that they rarely realize they're just playing the role someone else wrote for them." Trent snorted. "I don't have time for cheap philosophy." "Gavin, handle this. Give him $1,000 credit. I'll pay for it if the airline won't." "Yes, Mr. Vale," Page responded immediately. Then she turned to Dominic, her tone dripping with superiority. "Mr. Trent Vale has been very generous. If you agree to move, you'll receive a $1,000 travel credit. I think that's a fair offer." Dominic lifted his gaze, his eyes so sharp that Page felt her throat tighten. "Fair," he repeated, voice low but precise. "When you're downgrading a paying passenger to please someone with status? That's how you define fairness?" Gavin's patience was thinning. "Mr. Reed, we're trying to resolve this peacefully. If you continue to," Dominic interrupted, his voice deepening, resonant and commanding. "Mr. Holt, allow me to save you some time. I'm Dominic Reed, senior partner at Reed & Marlowe, specializing in aviation and international trade law, and I'm genuinely curious to see what legal precedent your airline plans to set by forcibly removing a passenger from a confirmed seat in favor of another's social rank." Page's eyes widened. Gavin froze. Trent Vale went still, as though he hadn't heard correctly. A low ripple of whispers spread across the cabin. A young passenger leaned toward his companion and whispered, "Reed & Marlowe? That firm won the global jet case last year. $80 million in damages." The energy in the cabin shifted completely. In a single sentence, the man they had dismissed had flipped the entire board. Gavin cleared his throat, struggling to regain composure, but his authority had already cracked. "Sir, regardless of who you are, we still have to maintain order on this aircraft." Dominic nodded slightly, his voice turning cold as steel. "Order isn't built on blind obedience, Mr. Holt. It's built on law and respect. Right now, your crew lacks both." The cabin went dead silent. Trent Vale's knuckles whitened against the armrest as he snapped, his voice cracking with fury. "This is ridiculous! You're delaying an international flight over a damn seat?" Dominic tilted his head, a faint smile ghosting across his lips. "No, I'm defending a principle. Because if I stay silent today, tomorrow you'll remove anyone who doesn't look wealthy enough." Trent glared, speechless, while Gavin glanced around and saw the shift in the passengers' eyes. They were no longer on his side. In that moment, the aircraft trembled slightly as it pushed back from the gate. The wing lights flickered, reflecting against the window beside 12A. Dominic's gaze drifted outside, and he froze. A strange glimmer slid across the metal surface. Thin, iridescent, oily. His eyes narrowed, the shift in his expression subtle but sharp. Calm turned to focus, confidence to calculation. He leaned closer to the glass, studying the wing carefully. And in that instant, guided by the instinct of a man trained to spot danger in fine print, Dominic realized what he was seeing wasn't a reflection. It was a warning. The verbal battle might have just ended, but a far greater fight, one that would decide the fate of everyone aboard, had already begun with that single, flickering streak of light. The business cabin was suffocatingly silent. Only the low hum of the engines and the uneven breaths of passengers pretending not to hear, not to see, filled the air. But no one could truly ignore it. Everyone could sense it. Something was about to break. Paige Whitmore stood beside Gavin Holt, her face pale. She had lost control of the situation, but pride would not let her back down. Trent Vale sat reclined, hands clasped in front of him, his gaze cold and expression twisted into a crooked smile. Dominic Reed, on the other hand, remained unnervingly calm. He looked at each of the three standing before him, then spoke in a voice so steady it sounded like he was reading an official statement. "You are violating the Civil Aviation Passenger Transport contract, specifically the clause regarding paid seat ownership and the right not to be downgraded without consent." Gavin adjusted his vest strap, his voice heavy. "Sir, I don't have time for arguments. You're disturbing the cabin. If you don't move immediately, I'll call airport security to have you removed from the aircraft." The words struck like thunder. A few passengers gasped quietly. Some sitting behind looked up, then quickly looked down again, afraid to be involved. Dominic leaned back slightly, crossing his arms, his gaze sharp as steel. "Security? Because I refused to be discriminated against." His voice was low and calm, yet carried a weight that made Gavin unconsciously step back. Paige interjected, her voice trembling though she tried to sound firm. "You're making everyone uncomfortable." Dominic raised an eyebrow. "Uncomfortable? I'm sitting quietly. I haven't yelled, I haven't caused a scene, I'm simply occupying the seat I paid for. So who's really creating the disturbance here, me or the man shouting orders at you?" He tilted his head toward Trent Vale. Trent let out a derisive laugh, then shot to his feet. "Enough," he barked. "I'm not waiting another second. Call the air marshals." "I have shares in this airline. Do you understand that, Paige? I have rights." Paige nodded quickly, but Gavin held up a hand to stop her. He knew if law enforcement got involved, the incident would be officially recorded. It would explode into a media crisis. But they couldn't let a passenger appear to defy the crew either. "Mr. Reed," Gavin said, his voice lower now but strained to the breaking point. "This is your last chance. You can leave your seat peacefully or be forced to. Please reconsider." Dominic looked at him, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet every word was as sharp and precise as a blade. "Mr. Holt, if you do that, your airline will face litigation, not just for discrimination, but for unlawful coercion. And when that happens, this incident will become a cited case in international discrimination law. I doubt your company wants to see its name printed in next year's law textbooks." Gavin opened his mouth, but no words came out. For a brief moment, he saw not a passenger before him, but a prosecutor delivering an indictment in court. Trent Vale burst into laughter. "Oh, please, this is ridiculous. You think you can scare me with your little legal speeches?" Dominic turned his head, a faint smile cutting through his calm. "No, I'm not threatening you. I'm stating facts. You can buy the most expensive seat, but you can't buy the right to be respected." Trent froze mid-laugh, his grin dying halfway. The cabin went dead still again. And then the unexpected happened. Dominic turned toward the window and saw it once more, that shimmering streak on the left wing. But this time, it was longer. The runway lights glinted across it, revealing a thin, iridescent trail running along the edge of the wing. His heartbeat quickened. He had handled a case involving hydraulic fluid leaks for Global Air 4 years ago. An incident that nearly ended in disaster. He knew that color. That faint bluish gleam wasn't rainwater. It was sky roll, the hydraulic fluid used in aircraft control systems. He drew a slow breath, forcing himself to stay calm. In his mind, the pieces fell into place. The maintenance crew during coal boarding, the cleaning cloth, the reflection he'd seen earlier. It all connected into a single, damning picture. Dominic turned back to Gavin, his tone low but urgent. "Mr. Holt, I strongly suggest you call the captain immediately. We may have a serious technical issue with the left wing." Gavin frowned. "What are you talking about?" "A possible hydraulic leak," Dominic replied firmly. "I just saw sky roll fluid seeping from the flap actuator line. If I'm right, this aircraft is not airworthy." Paige scoffed, her voice sharp and defensive. "You're just trying to distract us because you're afraid of being removed. A passenger lecturing us on aircraft mechanics?" Dominic didn't answer. He simply leaned forward, locking eyes with her. "You can think that if you like. But when that wing loses pressure over the Atlantic, will you still think I was wrong?" A ripple of unease spread through the cabin. For the first time, Gavin didn't know how to respond. Paige fell silent. Even Trent, furious moments ago, now stood frozen, a flicker of doubt crossing his eyes. Dominic quietly fastened his seatbelt. The storm of words had ended, but another storm was beginning, one not fought between people, but between intellect and arrogance. He murmured softly, almost to himself, "Game over." The air in the business cabin was so thick it could have been sliced with a knife. The sound of wind brushing against the fuselage, the low hum of the auxiliary engines, and the tense breathing of those standing between arrogance and fear blended into a single, suffocating rhythm. Dominic Reed sat motionless in seat 12A, fingers interlaced, eyes fixed on the window. The light from the runway reflected across his face, calm, composed. Yet in his gaze there was something that made it impossible for anyone to dismiss him. A few passengers exchanged uneasy glances. They didn't understand everything that was happening, but instinct told them this man was not someone who spoke without reason. Gavin Holt stood silent for a moment, then tried to reclaim his authority. "Mr. Reed, I suggest you stop making a scene. Our technical systems are thoroughly inspected before every flight. There is no leak." Dominic turned to him, his tone steady. "You may be right, but if I'm right and you ignore it, who will bear the responsibility then?" The question dropped like a weight of lead. Paige Whitmore pressed her lips together, forcing a smile, though her voice trembled. "This isn't your concern. You're a passenger, not an engineer." Dominic tilted his head slightly. "Actually, I'm an aviation attorney. I was part of the investigation into Global Air's hydraulic failure 4 years ago, the one that cost the company over $800 million for negligence in inspection. I think that qualifies me to recognize when a wing isn't safe." Paige froze. Gavin glanced at Trent Vale, hoping for support, but Trent was avoiding Dominic's gaze altogether. For a few seconds, there was only the sound of the fans and hearts beating faster. Then Dominic stood up. His voice cut through the silence, clear and measured, every word a blade. "Mr. Holt, I am formally requesting that you inform the captain that I, passenger in seat 12A, am issuing a safety alert. Under federal aviation regulations, the pilot in command must investigate any passenger report indicating potential danger to flight integrity, and I believe this qualifies." Gavin hesitated. Dominic wasn't shouting or acting out. He was following protocol precisely, legally. This wasn't a troublesome passenger. This was a man who knew the rules better than they did. Paige tried to speak, but Trent Vale exploded first. "Enough of this circus," he roared. "You're just stalling for attention, aren't you? I have a multi-million-dollar meeting waiting for me in London, do you understand? If this flight is delayed because of you, you'll regret it for the rest of your life." Dominic looked at him, his tone soft but cold enough to freeze the air. "You're afraid of being late. I'm afraid of dying. Tell me, Trent, how much is a human life worth in your meeting?" The cabin went utterly still. A young woman in the next row clasped her hand over her mouth, unable to believe what she'd heard. Trent's face flushed red, his hand tightening around his phone. "You'll pay for this," Dominic interrupted, his eyes sharp as a blade. "No, Trent. The ones who pay are those who believe money can buy the law." Gavin was truly shaken now. Sweat formed on his forehead. He hesitated, then lifted his radio, his voice unsteady. "Cabin to cockpit. We have a passenger reporting a possible technical issue on the left wing, requesting instructions." The captain's voice came back, calm and composed. "Confirm leak location?" Gavin looked to Dominic. "Can you specify where exactly?" Dominic pointed out the window, his finger steady, precise, as if he had done this all his life. "Leading edge, just where the wing meets the left engine. See that iridescent streak? It's spreading backward. If the light hits it at an angle, you'll see the greenish tint." Gavin bent closer to look, and his face drained of color. The substance wasn't an illusion. The captain's voice returned through the radio. "Copy that. Ground engineering team will inspect immediately. Hold position at the gate. Do not push back." Paige exhaled sharply, her face pale. She turned to Dominic, and for the first time, there was no arrogance in her eyes, only gratitude and fear. Trent Vale, meanwhile, sat slumped in his seat, stunned. The words, "The law applies to everyone," echoing in his mind. A minute later, the cabin door opened again, and ground technicians entered. Everyone watched through the window as flashlight beams swept across the wing. Then they saw it, clearly, a thin stream of hydraulic fluid dripping down the metal. A soft, "Oh my God," escaped from the back row. Dominic leaned back into his seat, silent. He didn't need to say anything. The truth was already speaking for him. Page hurried toward the front to report. Trent Vale lowered his head, wordless. Gavin stood frozen, still holding the radio, his eyes locked on the glistening leak outside. The undeniable proof that arrogance had nearly killed them all. Dominic closed his eyes and murmured, as if reminding himself, "Sometimes real power is having the courage to speak when everyone else stays silent." And in that moment, he was no longer just the passenger in seat 12A. He was the man who had saved an entire flight and perhaps taught everyone on board a lesson about the peril of human pride. The intercom crackled to life, and the captain's calm, steady voice filled the cabin. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Captain Soren Adler speaking. We've received a report of a potential technical issue on the left wing. For safety reasons, this flight will be temporarily delayed while our maintenance team conducts an inspection. Please remain seated and stay calm as we await further updates." The announcement rippled through the aircraft like a quiet earthquake, shaking not the plane, but the people within it. All whispers and breaths seemed to pause. A few passengers immediately pulled out their phones, texting loved ones. "Flight delayed. Possible technical issue." A young woman clutched her chest, breathing unevenly. Around her, eyes filled with curiosity, fear, and slowly respect, shifted toward seat 12A. Dominic Reed remained still, his hands clasped on his lap. There was no pride, no satisfaction on his face, only the quiet composure of a man who knew he had just prevented something catastrophic. Up front, Gavin Holt was sweating through his collar. He turned to Paige Whitmore, voice trembling. "Do you understand what this means? If that passenger was right, we were about to throw the man who saved this entire flight off the plane." Paige said nothing. She couldn't bring herself to look at Dominic. The polished mask of professionalism she'd worn so tightly now felt like cracked porcelain. In her mind, his words echoed over and over. "Order isn't built on blind obedience." She clenched her fists and whispered to herself, "I was wrong." Trent Vale, the man who had demanded the seat, sat frozen, his arrogance stripped bare. He leaned forward, face pale, realizing for the first time what it felt like to lose control. All his privileges, platinum cards, and corporate connections meant nothing against the hard truth of a mechanical fault. A man in the back row whispered, "That guy, he just saved the flight, didn't he?" The woman beside him nodded. "Yes, if we'd taken off, we'd be flying with a hydraulic leak. Something like that caused an accident in Chicago back in 2019. The murmur spread like a small flame of awakening. The man they had dismissed was now the reason they were alive. 10 minutes later, the cabin door opened, and 3 engineers in reflective jackets stepped aboard, carrying high-powered flashlights. They didn't speak, only exchanged quick hand signals. One of them leaned toward the window, shining a beam at the spot Dominic had indicated. The white light swept across the wing, revealing it clearly, a shimmering green streak of hydraulic fluid. "Confirmed leak," one of the engineers said quietly into his radio. "Slat actuator bleeding from the third feed line. At altitude, pressure would have widened the crack." Gavin's face turned ashen. He looked back at Dominic, speechless. Moments later, Captain Adler himself entered the cabin, broad-shouldered, graying hair, and the calm authority of a man who'd seen everything. He walked straight to seat 12A. His voice was rough but full of sincerity. "You're the passenger who made the report, correct?" Dominic stood. "Yes, Captain. I noticed something irregular before takeoff." The captain nodded and extended his hand. "Soren Adler, captain of this flight. Mr. Reed, you just saved over 100 lives. The maintenance team confirmed a genuine leak. Had we taken off, 3 hours over the Atlantic, the flap control system would have lost pressure. I don't even want to imagine what would have happened." The cabin was silent. Paige covered her mouth, eyes glistening. Gavin lowered his head in shame. Trent Vale looked up, but couldn't meet anyone's eyes. Dominic replied calmly, "Thank you, Captain. I only did what anyone should. I'm a passenger here too. My life is tied to everyone else's." The captain turned to Gavin. "Keep the aircraft at the gate. I'm cancelling this flight. All passengers will be rebooked. I don't gamble with lives over a maintenance error." His voice soon echoed over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, for your safety, Flight Global Air 110 has been cancelled. We sincerely apologize for the inconvenience, but this decision ensures the well-being of every soul aboard." The sound of sighs and groans rose, but mingled with them came something unexpected: applause. At first it was scattered and hesitant, then it spread throughout the cabin. No one knew who started it, but every pair of eyes turned toward Dominic. Paige stepped forward, her voice trembling as she spoke. "Mr. Reed, I'm sorry. I handled everything completely wrong." Dominic looked at her, not with anger, but with a quiet understanding. "You weren't wrong to do your job. You just forgot one thing. Sometimes a moment of awareness outweighs 1,000 lines of procedure." The words made Paige lower her head as tears fell onto her white gloves. Trent Vale rose and walked slowly toward Dominic. For a brief moment, he seemed ready to speak, perhaps to thank him, but pride still clung to him like armor. In the end, all he could mutter was, "You got lucky." Dominic didn't turn, only replied softly, "No, we got lucky." And as the ground crew began lowering the stairs for passengers to disembark, the business cabin felt cleansed of arrogance, of ego, of everything false that had filled it before. The eyes following Dominic now carried respect, gratitude, and a hint of remorse. As for Dominic Reed, he simply smiled, weary but serene, because he knew that sometimes, to prove a truth, one must remain calm, right in the heart of the storm. Midnight at JFK Airport. Neon lights cast a cold glow over the polished tile floors as passengers from the cancelled Global Air Flight 110 poured into the terminal, their faces a mix of exhaustion and quiet gratitude. Among them, Dominic Reed, the man who had occupied seat 12A, was approached by a young airline staff member. "Mr. Reed, please come with me," The airport director would like to speak with you. Her voice was soft, respectful, though she tried to hide it. Dominic nodded, picking up his leather briefcase and following her through the murmuring crowd, still whispering about the man who had saved the flight. In the distance, Trent Vale was arguing furiously at the ticket counter, his angry voice echoing through the terminal. "Do you have any idea who I am? I'm a shareholder in Global Air. I demand a private jet right now." A passenger nearby shook his head and began filming on his phone. Within minutes, the outburst was captured, a record of a man once proud and powerful, now humiliated before the world. Dominic entered the VIP lounge, where the warm amber lighting stood in sharp contrast to the chaos outside. A tall, middle-aged man in a perfectly tailored black suit stepped forward. "Mr. Reed, I'm Miles Harrington, the airport's executive director. On behalf of Global Air, I want to personally thank you." He extended his hand, gripping Dominic's firmly, his tone sincere. "Without your intervention, we might have faced a tragedy." The engineering team confirmed the hydraulic system was indeed leaking. If that plane had taken off, the flaps would have lost control mid-Atlantic. Dominic nodded slightly. "I only did what needed to be done." Miles gestured for him to sit, his expression serious. "Captain Adler filed a full report. You were asked to leave your seat for a so-called VIP passenger, even threatened with removal, and yet you ended up saving the entire crew. On behalf of Global Air, I apologize." "That's not necessary," Dominic replied calmly. "What matters is that they stopped the plane in time." Miles shook his head. "It's more than that. The airline has already opened an internal investigation. Both crew members, Paige Whitmore and Gavin Holt, have been suspended. They'll answer before the review board." Dominic said nothing. There was no satisfaction in his eyes, only quiet reflection. To him, justice was never about revenge. It was about awakening. Outside, Trent Vale's shouting continued. "Do you know who you're talking to? I lost millions because of this. I'll sue Global Air." The ticket agent, a young woman named Nora Kim, stammered nervously. "Sir, the entire flight has been cancelled. We can rebook you for the earliest flight tomorrow morning." "No, I want to leave tonight. I have an important meeting." "And if you had boarded that flight," a deep voice interrupted from behind, "you might never have made it to that meeting." Trent turned. Dominic Reed stood there, calm as a shadow. The entire terminal seemed to freeze. "You," Trent stammered, his voice cracking with a mixture of rage and shame. "You're the reason my flight was cancelled." Dominic stepped closer, his gaze steady but without malice. "No, Trent. I saved it. We were on the same plane, but you thought you lived on a higher level of the world." Trent's jaw tightened. "You think you're some kind of hero?" Dominic answered slowly, his tone cutting but calm. "No, I'm just someone who listens to the sound of engines and to the voice within. Two things you've ignored for far too long." With that, he turned and walked away. Trent stood frozen, silent for the first time in his life, unable to find a single word. An hour later, Dominic was escorted to the TWWA hotel, where Global Air had arranged the presidential suite for him to rest. But once the door closed, he didn't open the champagne or turn on the television. He simply stood by the window, gazing at the distant runways where other planes lifted safely into the moonlit sky. From his shirt pocket, he pulled out his boarding pass. Business class, seat 12A, window. One seat, one moment, one decision. Something so small, yet powerful enough to shape the fate of hundreds. He whispered to himself, "Sometimes, the only thing separating the strong from the weak isn't wealth or status. It's the ability to stand firm when you're being underestimated." The next morning, Global Air released an official statement to the press. "We extend our deepest gratitude to passenger Dominic Reed, whose vigilance helped identify a critical technical fault and prevented a potential disaster. A full investigation is underway." The news went viral. Major outlets ran headlines. "Attorney spots technical failure. Saves entire Global Air Flight 110. Meanwhile, in a small airport cafe, Trent Vale sat hunched over his phone, staring at the screen in disbelief. The video of his outburst had spread across the internet. Beneath it, the caption read, "When money can't buy dignity, investment CEO humiliated by the man in seat 12A." Outside the window, Dominic Reed stepped into the car waiting for him. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. Because the real verdicts of this world aren't handed down in courtrooms. They're written in the eyes of those who witnessed the truth. And the world had seen everything. 36 hours after the cancellation of Global Air Flight 110, the internet exploded. Videos, photos, and first-hand accounts from passengers spread at lightning speed. One hashtag dominated worldwide trends. @seat12A. The clip of Trent Vale shouting at the ticket counter, slamming his phone, and berating the staff reached millions of views overnight. In the comments, users quoted Dominic Reed's words alongside a single caption: "Sometimes the quiet man saves the world, while the loud one ruins himself." From a powerful CEO, Trent had become a global symbol of corrupted privilege, of those who believed that money and status exempted them from rules. Meanwhile, Dominic Reed woke in the luxury suite of the WWA hotel, dawn light spilling softly through the curtains. He stood before the mirror, tightening his tie, his reflection as calm as it had been the night before. He had no idea he had become the center of a worldwide story. And he didn't need to. His phone buzzed with a message from Miles Harrington, the airport director. "Mr. Reed, I wanted to inform you that Global Air will formally honor you and issue an official letter of gratitude. The 2 employees involved have been suspended, and a special investigation has been opened." Dominic replied simply, "I only hope they learn the right lesson." He packed his belongings and left the hotel. In the lobby, a reporter spotted him, camera raised. "Mr. Reed, can you comment on the incident aboard the flight?" Dominic shook his head slightly. There was no incident, just a reminder that safety and dignity should never be traded for convenience. Then he walked away, leaving behind a flurry of flashing cameras. At the same time, on the 48th floor of the Orion Capitol Tower, another kind of storm was brewing. The boardroom was thick with tension as a crisis meeting unfolded. On the large screen at the center of the table, a wall of headlines glowed. CEO Trent Vale humiliates airline staff. Flight later cancelled due to safety issue. Investors question Orion Capital's ethical standards. #seat12A becomes global symbol of dignity versus arrogance. A board member slammed a newspaper onto the table. "Trent, do you understand you've set the company on fire?" Trent slumped in his leather chair, tie undone, eyes sunken. "It was just a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding?" A woman's sharp voice cut through. "You threatened airline staff, insulted a black passenger, and were filmed screaming in public. Millions are boycotting Orion Capital. CalPERS withdrew $500 million this morning alone. Do you even grasp what that means?" Trent said nothing. Outside the glass windows, Manhattan lay shrouded in mist, like his empire, grand, but quietly collapsing. The chairman's voice was gravelly, final. "You've turned our brand into the face of arrogance and discrimination. You are no longer fit to lead Orion Capital. We're asking for your immediate resignation." Trent looked around the table. Not a single eye met his. Everyone had already chosen distance over loyalty. The pen clattered onto the desk. A soft click echoed, a quiet sound marking the end of a man who once believed everything could be bought. That same morning, Global Air held an internal press conference. The CEO's voice carried across the hall. "We were lucky, but luck is not a strategy. From today, every crew member will be retrained in de-escalation and unconscious bias recognition. We'll call it the GA1110 Protocol." On the screen behind him, bold white letters appeared on a black background. GA1110. Dignity is not optional. They never mentioned Dominic Reed by name, but everyone knew where the story began. That evening, Dominic sat alone in a small cafe near Heathrow Airport, watching the news on TV. The footage showed Trent Vale surrounded by reporters as protesters outside held up signs reading "Respect over rank." The hashtag #Seat12A blinked in the corner of the screen. Dominic smiled faintly, not out of pride, but because fairness, though it takes the long road, was still alive. He opened his leather notebook and wrote a single line. "They can take away your seat, but never your right to sit with dignity." Outside, a plane lifted into the night sky, its tail lights carving a golden streak through the clouds. Dominic looked up and whispered softly, as if closing the final chapter of his story. In the end, justice always flies higher than privilege. 3 days after the cancellation of Global Air Flight 110, the story of the man in Seat 12A had grown far beyond an aviation headline. It had become a social symbol. Across the internet, people discussed, shared, and analyzed the incident not as a flight malfunction, but as a lesson in dignity and prejudice. On CNN's morning broadcast, the anchor opened with a serious tone. A black attorney was asked to give up his business class seat to make room for a VIP passenger. Minutes later, he discovered a technical failure that could have led to disaster. Today, he's no longer being called a passenger, but a hero of law and reason. Behind her, the screen displayed a photo of Dominic Reed gazing out the airplane window, captured by a fellow passenger. It wasn't the face of a movie hero, but of an ordinary man doing the right thing. Along the bottom of the screen scrolled the hashtags: Seat 12A, Integrity over Status, #Global Air 110, surrounded by thousands of online comments. Meanwhile, in London, Dominic Reed stepped into the glass building hosting the International Commercial Arbitration Tribunal. No one inside the room knew he was the man the world was talking about. And he didn't need them to. He only needed complete focus. Across the table sat the opposing counsel, a team of lawyers representing an investment conglomerate connected to none other than Orion Capital, Trent Vale's fallen empire. Leading them was Richard Goss, a silver-haired Englishman with the self-assured air of someone who had won dozens of high-profile cases. He strode over, extending a hand with a polite yet condescending smile. "I heard you had quite an eventful flight recently, Mr. Reed." Dominic smiled faintly and shook his hand firmly. "Oh, not at all. I just spoke up at the right moment, just as I intend to today." Richard hesitated, unaware that the match had already begun before he even took his seat. When the arbitration started, Dominic spoke little, but every word landed with surgical precision. He didn't raise his voice or pound the table. With nothing more than well-placed sentences, he commanded the entire panel's attention. The opposing side presented thick stacks of financial reports, graphs, and statements. Dominic flipped through only a few pages of his file and spoke evenly. "Your evidence appears comprehensive except for one detail. It breaches Clause 17B of the confidentiality agreement signed exactly 9 months ago. Shall I read that section aloud for the panel?" The room fell silent. The arbitrator's eyes shifted toward the opposition. Richard Goss froze, speechless. Dominic calmly closed his folder and ended with a single line. "Law is like the wings of an aircraft. Once integrity leaks out, it can no longer lift anyone." That afternoon, he exited the glass atrium. The grey London sky mirrored above him. A light drizzle began to fall, cold but cleansing. His phone rang. It was Miles Harrington. "Mr. Reed, I wanted you to know that Global Air has completed its investigation. Both crew members have been terminated for serious misconduct. The company has also sent an official letter of gratitude to your firm, Reed and Marlowe." Dominic paused before replying quietly. "Thank you, Miles. But don't thank me. Thank those who have the courage to admit their mistakes and make them right." Across the ocean, Trent Vale sat alone in the dimness of his Hamptons estate. The only sounds were the distant crash of waves and the flicker of a television newscast. Orion Capital withdraws from European markets, shareholders dumping stock, former Sir Trent Vale resigns. His face was gaunt, his eyes hollow. His phone rang incessantly. Journalists, lawyers, PR advisors, but he didn't answer. On the table lay an open issue of the Financial Times. The headline read, "When arrogance takes flight, it forgets that the gravity of integrity will always bring it down." Trent stared at the words for a long time, then tossed the paper to the floor. For the first time, he wasn't angry, just empty. Back in London, Dominic returned to his hotel, sitting by the window overlooking the misty city. He opened his laptop to find an email from Miles with an attached photo, a new sign in Global Air's training room. GA1110 Protocol, where dignity takes flight. Dominic studied the words for a moment, then smiled faintly. No medals, no ceremonies. Yet somewhere, an entire system had changed because of him. He took a sip of coffee, his expression calm and steady. When law is understood, justice speaks. When people understand one another, the world is saved. And in the reflection of the city lights on the window pane, the image of the man from seat 12A appeared, not as a hero, but as a reminder that true strength doesn't lie in titles. but in how we stand against injustice. 2 weeks after global air flight 110 was cancelled, the city of New York still echoed with the remnants of that story. The newspapers had stopped mentioning Trent Vale, but the name Dominic Reed continued to quietly spread, not as a media figure, but as a metaphor for self-respect in a world ruled by status. On social media, the comments kept coming. He didn't shout, he didn't seek revenge, he simply stood his ground, and the entire system had to step back. You don't have to be a hero, you just have to have the courage to say no when something is wrong. The story had long surpassed the boundaries of an aviation incident. It had become a living lesson, taught in classrooms on leadership, law, and professional ethics. That morning, Dominic walked into the offices of Reed and Marlowe, where he was a senior partner. The long oak paneled corridor carried the scent of freshly brewed coffee. Young associates nodded respectfully as he passed, their eyes filled with quiet admiration. News of the man in seat 12A had reached the firm, but no one dared to mention it. Everyone knew Dominic had no taste for glory, only for results. He set his briefcase on the desk, opened his laptop, and noticed a small box waiting there with no sender's name. A card was attached. From someone who knows that without you, I would never have had the chance to say thank you. Soren Adler. Inside the box was a die, cast Boeing 707 model at a 1/200 scale, exquisitely detailed. Etched along its silver fuselage were the words, "To Dominic Reed, the man who grounded pride and lifted lives." He brushed a finger along the metal wing, the chill spreading gently to his fingertips. A faint, rare, genuine smile crossed his face. The office door opened. Olivia Chen, his assistant, stepped in, her voice cautious. "Mr. Reed, the press keeps calling. They want interviews to hear about your experience on that flight. Should I decline them all?" Dominic nodded softly. "Yes. Let the story speak for itself. When words become tools, the meaning of action fades." She nodded, then hesitated. "Do you regret it? Not suing the airline, I mean. They would have had to pay a fortune." Dominic leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant. "Regret? No, I didn't want money. I wanted change. And they changed. A lawsuit would have turned this story into a transaction. I wanted it to be a lesson." He paused, morning light spilling through the window and reflecting across his face. Justice doesn't always need a courtroom. Sometimes it just needs someone who refuses to leave their seat. By noon, his phone buzzed. A message from Miles Harrington read, "Global Air has officially launched the GA1110 protocol for all global staff. Your story will be featured in their new training course, Respect Under Pressure. Thank you, Dominic." He smiled faintly and replied with just 3 words. "Keep it flying." That evening, as the city lights came alive, Dominic left the office and walked along Fifth Avenue. The cold wind brushed against his collar, and the glowing billboards lit his face. Across the street, a group of college students chatted animatedly. A young woman with dark skin held up a magazine and said aloud, "Here he is, the man in seat 12A. He made me believe you don't need power to create change." Dominic smiled but said nothing. He kept walking, melting into the flow of the crowd. No one needed to know who he was, because for him, The greatest recognition didn't come from applause. It came from the quiet change in others. Night fell. In his high-rise apartment, Dominic placed the model airplane on a shelf among thick law books. The warm light reflected off its silver body, casting his calm, steady reflection in the glass. Serene, grounded, and free. He looked at it for a long moment, then whispered, "Dignity isn't something given to you. It's something you hold on to, even when you're told to leave." The model plane was silent, yet in that quiet room, it felt as though the whole world was listening. Because sometimes, the greatest victory isn't in making others bow their heads, but in ensuring you never lower your own. If the story of Dominic Reed makes you believe that intellect and integrity are still humanity's strongest wings, leave a like, share this message, and subscribe so you don't miss the next journeys where ordinary people continue to write extraordinary stories. And so the journey of Dominic Reed came to a close, not with applause, nor with the glare of fame, but with a quiet transformation that rippled across the skies. From a moment of humiliation, he turned insult into opportunity, teaching the world one simple truth: dignity is never a privilege, it is a birthright. Global Air changed its procedures. Millions changed the way they saw one another. And Trent Vale, the man who once believed power was eternal, learned that the kind of power built on arrogance is always the first to disappear. This story is not just about aviation or law or status. It is about how we treat each other when no one is watching. Because sometimes the greatest strength is not in shouting to be heard, but in staying silent long enough that when you finally speak, the world must listen. Dominic Reed did not defeat anyone. He simply made them face themselves. And that is the truest victory. If this story made you reflect, leave a like to spread the message that respect is not a choice. It is a duty. Share this video so more people understand that in a world filled with noise and arrogance, the calm, the principled, and the just are the ones who hold true power. And don't forget to subscribe to hear more stories like this, where ordinary people quietly teach us the art of human dignity.